Hey, it's Don the Auction Professor. Today I wanted to talk specifically about black glass and onion skin bottles. Now I'm going to cover black glass in general just because I do buy it when I do see it. I collect some of these. Some of these are from my personal collection. I love glass bottles. I don't sell them mostly unless they're like a Demijohn. I'm going to show you some Demijohns if you're not familiar with what that is. It's actually a huge black glass bottle. But this is basically the shape of an onion bottle. It looks kind of like an onion in shape-wise this way. This is a newer one. This is probably 1870s. It's black glass. When you hold it up to the light, it actually is green, actually. It's called black glass because sitting there and looking at it from a distance, it looks black because light can't penetrate it at that angle. When you hold it up to the light, it is semi-translucent, so you can see that it's green when you hold it up to the light. It just depends on the style of glass. Like this is a case gin, this is a whiskey bottle, and this is a wine or something, or a port or something along that line. Now these all range in date from say the 1850s through the 1880s. And some of these have markings and it'll say, you know, what the bottle is for and things like that. But a lot of them don't. Some of them are like mold cast or free-formed without any mold lines. But I'm not going to concern myself with the actual construction of it because most bottles in certain areas always sell, like Demijohn specifically, or onion bottles as well. They always sell if you get the right one. So I'm just going to go over to the screen and we're going to show you just some black glass bottles. And I do run into these. I even have bought some of these at thrift stores. My pickers get them up sometimes. I'll see them, you know, even from bottle diggers will find these up, bottle shows and things like that. Because there are national bottle shows as well, too. I don't go to the bottle shows, though, but we're going to go over to the screen and I'm going to show you some bottles today. And today, as I said, we're just going to talk a little bit about bottles. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm just going to give you some ideas. I really recommend, if this is something that you run across or see or are interested in, to actually spend your own time to research some of these items. Now, you can type in onion bottle, black glass, Demijohn, carboy, carbuy, or Jimmy John. Those are all things that you'll see in the bottle category, or free blown, freehand, mold blown. These are all things that you'll see. I know quite a bit about bottles. We've bought, sold, and do collect some bottles, so I've got a very good idea on bottles in general. And we've sold bottles for $300, $400, $500, $600 in the past, and you know, bottles can go up into the thousands of dollars here. I'm just going to show you some prices here, show you a few different bottles. I'm going to save the best ones for last, which are the most expensive ones that I run into. But I'll save the best ones for last. These are the ones that you probably won't see very often, if at all. But again, they do show up from time to time. So again, we'll just start with this one here. This is like a Civil War era. And a lot of the ones, now these photos aren't the greatest, unfortunately, but this kind of gives you an idea on the markings and things you can see. Back in the day, they marked them on the bottom, or they embedded the marking actually like in the rim around the top of the glass. But that's one kind I've seen. You can see the price here, $649. This one's $616, and again, it's for a very specific place, so that's the key. This is a college one. I might have talked about some of these in another video just in general on researching and pricing, but again, bottles do sell very high, so this is $616. Here's another one, and this one has a seal. Now, see this little glass seal here? Let me zoom in on it here. This means all the difference in the world right here. Now, the normal bottle without that is not as dateable, or dateable really in general at all, other than the construction, but this thing right here, this glass seal, adds hundreds of dollars to the value of this. And even on just this seal here, sometimes you will find these off of a bottle. They've been knocked off or something over age. Or somebody broke the bottle and they saved the seal, and that does show up. And sometimes just this little seal here can go for hundreds, even $1,000 or more. I've seen them sell for on eBay. This one happens to be dated. It has 1810 actually in the seal, but again, $611. Here's a, I think this is a bitters. Now, another area would be bitters bottles. If you don't know what a bitters bottle is, just type in bitters and bottle, and you are going to be blown away by some of the prices you see on. These are things that you see. I do see bitter bottles. I do have a couple of my own. I have sold bitters bottles actually into the almost $1,000 range. There are some that go horrendously high, so I'm not going to show you many bitters bottles because they don't necessarily have to be black glass to be a bitters. But that would be something else you would want to look up for. But again, this one's $349. Here's another one. This is Civil War. Now this says Pontil. I'm not going to go into big detail on Pontil. Pontil means it was blown from the bottom, and they had the rod that holds this that they hand blow, and it leaves a scar on the bottom from when they break it off. Sometimes they'll heat flash it, which means it'll smooth out the Pontil. But this was made in a mold. You can see the mold line there, the mold line there, and it was blown by hand with a big steel hollow rod, and it was connected right up here. But that's the basics of it. This one's $339. And again, we're just going to show you real quickly here. I'm not going to spend a ton of time because this is something you really need to do some of this research yourself to understand this and to know what they are. Now this is a double one. This is an onion mallet. Onion is the basic shape. It looks like an onion, and then has elongated, stretched the top part of it there. But that's the gist of it. $265 for that one. Here's an earlier example. This one's really crude. This is probably free blown. Yeah, free blown here. That means that there is no mold. Somebody literally formed this with like a wood paddle mold. It's got a high pontil in the bottom, meaning that the let's zoom in on this one here, meaning that the base of the bottle comes up to about here on that bottle, right up to there. You can see it down there in it, and that's how it was hand blown. Very crude, very early, 1740 to 1770. That's literally when these were made. They're very scarce for the most part. This is just like the one I showed you, gin. People will go in there sometimes and paint the wording on them if it had faint wording. This one could be the original paint on this one. It's hard to tell. They did paint these back then sometimes too. Now I buy the gin ones. I do have some that I have saved myself. This is earlier than the one I show you in the beginning of this video, but this one's $224. Another onion here. This is an early one. This is $131. Let's see here. Next one. This is Pontil. Big Pontil scar on the bottom. Again, that's where it was hooked up, and then it was flashed with real high temperature flames just to smooth it back out once they tapped off and broke off the rod and the rest of it. But this is a rum, $129. If you find black glass, most black glass bottles are worth 20 or 30 bucks minimum if you do it right and list them in the correct category. Now, there's many categories you can list these in. Most people list them in bottles, but if they're Civil War era, I always list them in the Civil War section and sell them for more. Now, this is a specific one. Some of these early Wolf schnapps sell very well. This is something that you could actually find. These aren't super, super rare, but they do always sell. And like the black glass, I have run into black glass bottles at Savers before they closed. I've seen them at thrift stores in other areas, and I've seen them at flea markets and things like that too. Even at auctions, they'll show up. Sometimes you see a whole bunch of these, not just black glass, but case-style bottles, and you can buy them at an auction for like 50 bucks for like a dozen or two of these bottles. Split them up and sell them separately. But this one's $125. Another onion. Now these are going up a little higher. This is an early British one. There is a way to tell the difference. I'm not going to go into the long detail on that because there's a lot to bottles, but the general idea on what they look like is what's key here. Dirty or not, sometimes these are pulled out of the ground by bottle diggers who will take big rods and stick them into the ground until they hear it clink something. I've been out doing that once or twice with somebody else who's a hobbyist who does do that, and I've also sold bottles for him in the past too for some good money. But this one here, it is an earlier one. This is probably 1700s or earlier, $595. Here's another onion skin, 1710 to 1720, $495. Now, I know a lot of people say, who's going to find this? I find these occasionally. So you just have to know what they are and the potential value and how to search them to know what you're doing with these. So again, you could have walked by these, never thought a thing of it because it's out of your area, and you just walked by a ton of money sitting on a table somewhere. I've even found these at garage sales. Not this old, of course, but Civil War vintage into like the 1890s. They'll just be something that people had laying around or their grandmother had it. They do show up at estate sales very often, honestly. So anyway, let's move on to a couple more here. Now this is a real early one. Somebody's cleaned this up. They've got shipwreck. I don't know how true that would be, but this is an early one. And usually you'll see like stretch marks or bubble in the glass, and that usually tells you if it's early. Whittled, they'll call it sometimes too. But this one's $206. We're going to go into the Demijohns here in just a second. Another onion skin. Again, these dates, you can date these very, very accurately by how they were made. At least you'll have a end date. Like this one's handmade, blob top, and the whole works. So $197. Let's see here. Next one, another onion. Again, some of the people who sell these have no clue on how to tell. They just know it's a good one. So, and they're not huge bottles either. You can see the gentleman's hand there. They're not huge bottles. So, it's something that you can honestly find. But $1.79. Now here's a Demijohn. Now a Demijohn, they'll call him Carboy, Carbui, or Jimmy John. And that just basically means it's a big container, usually 3 to 5 gallons minimum, depending on who's categorizing them. Up to 15 or 20 gallons were held in some of these. Now, I've had some huge ones that were 3 or 4 feet tall, so, they do show up in big sizes. They can be mailed. I've mailed them before without issue. It just takes, some getting used to packing stuff like this. But, some of these you can run across, and people put dimes and pennies in them and not even knowing they're that old. So, it's something that you might even be able to get for, 10, 15, 20 bucks for one of these bottles, and then turn them around. And a lot of times I buy them cheap because other people don't want to mess with packing them. I don't mind spending 20 minutes to pack one of these specifically if I'm going to make $200 or $300. I mean, it's a no-brainer, especially the smaller ones. But this is a Demijohn here. Mostly wine. They were like for mass transportation of these items. A lot of the time you'll see wicker that's been around the bottom. Most of these earlier ones like this, though, the wicker is long fallen apart and gone. But again, even new ones of these sells for a couple $100 bucks. Here's another one. This is a newer one, you can kind of tell, but this one still went for $300. And this one here, he's got free shipping, so it's probably going to be 30 or 40 bucks in shipping on this, maybe a little more, depending on how he does it. Bubble wrap really does the difference on something like this. So anyway, you can see the values in these. I've got the last couple coming up in a minute here, so you can see some higher dollar ones. These are just touching the surface on the field in general. There are massive amounts of collectors for these. Anybody who likes whiskey bottles, gin bottles, or alcohol collectibles in general buy these. They'll buy the cheaper ones a lot. So just the average Joe Schmo down the street who's got beer bottles, sometimes you'll see some of these in their collection. Not necessarily this specific one, but you'll see vintage beer bottles and such forth. All black glass here too on most of what I'm showing you. As I said, but here's another Demijohn. Now this is similar to the style I run into the most. This is probably like see 40 bucks on shipping. They're not huge, high dollar cost to ship some of these. So, but something like this is something you're gonna run into. This is honestly a newer one. You can see the markings. This is like 1920s or 30s. This is actually an Italian one, so this might even be even newer than that. And he still took $225 plus shipping. So again, any of the Demijohns sell. You can see them in 2 different words, but the official spelling of it is one word, Demijohn. Now here is a real nice early one with the seal. This is very, very dateable. But here you go. Here's a key one here. Now this is a very, very scarce one. It's the maker that means the most, Lord Poulet of Hinton. Now this is obviously a British one. This one sold for $1,848. And sitting in a bunch of bottles at an antique mall or something else, you could miss this. And this could show up. Even a dealer wouldn't have a clue that it was that old if they don't mess with bottles. I buy most of my glass bottles that we've bought and sold, or even some of the ones in my collection, from dealers who didn't have a clue what they had. And that's usually what happens with these. It's the same story for the postcards, the same story for, most of what we buy. Most dealers only know certain items. If you're in an antique mall or something, most dealers only know the bigger items. That's what they're doing in an antique mall. There's not a real way to just run into a booth and find a whole bunch of just postcards, and that's all the person has in a booth. So anyway, this is what the kind of thing that I look for too. And again, don't say it's not going to turn up, and don't think that you can't find them. I find them all the time. Not early ones this old or this valuable, but I find 50 to say $150, $200 bottles, a couple times a month, all the time, every single month of the year. And that's just a given. I've done it that way for years. Sometimes, as I said, I'll walk up to a whole bunch sitting on a table somewhere, and I'll buy them all out. I'll get a big group deal and buy a whole bunch for almost nothing. So again, this kind of stuff does sell. And I got one more here to show you. If you do a quick search on eBay, you are going to find a bunch of these. And this one's like $1,000. And this one's nothing super special. It has a little anchor in GR, which is a British marking on here. This one says lime juice. Now, again, as I said, you can find the markings and track these down. And as I said, that actual seal sometimes you can find on its own without the bottle, and those still go for money. Even if it looks like a broken piece of glass, that seal is the difference. That seal will still sell. But that's what I got for you today. Again, I said it's just going to be a quick video here. If you're interested in knowing, I really recommend you looking it up yourself. You are going to be surprised at some of the information and prices you see on these. Well, that's what I have for you. You can see there's some high prices in bottles. Yes, there are some that are very scarce that you may not run into, but there's also a lot that you will. That'll be a quick turnaround. You know, a couple dollars for a bottle like this, I should get 20 or 30 bucks. The same with any of these black glass bottles. Locally, you might even sell them higher. But that's what I got for you today. Hopefully that gives you a little more ideas on some other things you can search for. And again, I'm going to keep trying to put out different aspects of what we do and things that we buy and things that you can make money on as time goes by. Well, that's what I have for you today. Hopefully you liked the video. If you did, please hit the like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon up top to be notified when I post new videos or when I go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.